Hello, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Derek Main, and I review translated literature. I keep bumping this table. So for today, we are going to review The Hour of the Star by Clarice Lispector, a new translation by Benjamin Moser, and this is A New Directions. So as I mentioned in my last video when I talked about reviewing this, I got this as a gift from a really good friend of mine. He's actually the only friend of mine, real life friend, not Twitter or anything like that, where we exchange books and ideas and stuff. So it's really cool. And this was an especially nice gift because I have never read Clarice Lispector, and in fact had only heard her name, seen her name in passing, and knew that she was sort of a bright light of translated literature, but didn't know anything about her. So it was really cool to dive in. And so she is originally Ukrainian and then moved to Brazil in 1922, okay? It says on the back cover she arrived penniless. And then she spent time in Europe, the United States, then back in Brazil, and passed away in 1977. So this era that she wrote was 1920 to 1977. I believe this is her last novel. Yes, the final work. And it seems like a really good one to start with, I'll say, because, well, it's an incredible book. And I'm just going to say this about the writer and the writing. There are comparisons, not just here on the back cover. I think, who do they compare to? Maybe Kafka. There's somewhere here. Maybe it's in the introduction. They have a couple comparisons. I find her, and I don't say this lightly, I find her truly incomparable. I've read a lot of literature, maybe some Nabokov, like as far as some of the fun that they have in messing with stylistic form, but no, not even that. This is sort of the beauty of someone who has that kind of, born in Ukraine to a Jewish family, moves to Brazil, penniless, marries a diplomat, then Europe, America, just kind of travels through the world and sees so many perspectives, because what comes out, it feels to me like she, as a writer, it's like an alien that comes down whose only job is to record in fiction sort of what the human existence is like. I mean, that's one way I could kind of describe the way she approaches everything. Her descriptions of reality, her descriptions of life, they are just so unique, so very much just belonging to this one voice. I loved it. It is a really hard thing to put your finger on. This is something that I would have really liked to studied in school. I would love to take a class on her works and stuff because, I read so many books, right? Like, so as soon as I finish one, I'm on to the next. And this is one where I think I will do a reread at some point. Obviously, I'm going to look up and read more of her work. But I also would love to read a little bit more scholarly stuff about her writing. Because frankly, I'm not smart enough to get all of it. I mean, there's so many elements and layers in there. In a very slim novel. I mean, this is maybe 70 pages, the novella. I'm trying to count with the maybe 77 with the intros, and then at the end there's a note about the translation. One of the notes about the translation they talked about was when she was first translated, they tried to correct her errors, and that ended up basically screwing up the work because her errors were not errors. And she clearly is a master of language who is one of those who knows all the rules and so knows when and how to break them for stunning effect. The story of this is we have a male narrator who is narrating the life and the story of a young woman who is a typist. And this young woman is just very, very strange, kind of naive, sure, a virgin, someone who is feeling her way through the whole world and everything feels brand new, kind of like a baby doe or something. But very sensitive, also like an open nerve. We're going to get into a couple examples where maybe you'll get a chance to sort of get at what I'm saying, which is that this... So, let me put it this way. The narrator is the one explaining her, and I think that's a big part of how the story is supposed to unfold and what we're supposed to understand, because the narrator is more of a curmudgeon male writer who is trying to make sense of this foreign thing, this silly, naive, flighty thing, right? And I think that he gets a lot wrong, and on purpose through the writing, and doesn't really get at who she is, why she is. He's so befuddled and bemused by her that he can end up making fun of her quite a lot, and then in ways where, as the reader, you question the narrator and kind of come to your own conclusions about this girl, if that makes sense. And that's a really nice layered way of telling this story. And so the girl's going to meet a boy, but not in any sort of meet cute rom-com. I mean, the boy's just kind of a jerk to her. They just meet and talk on benches and stuff, and the boy is as bemused, befuddled by her as the narrator is. But of course she takes it as a relationship and as a boyfriend. She gets most of her exterior outside world stuff through a clock radio that she listens to at night. And so she'll ask him what certain words mean, and if the clock radio tells her something, a news item or something, to her, it's canon, it's huge. Her world is so small. I think there's the narrator, who's not a character in it. There is, who's just telling the story. There is Macabre, the woman, the girl, the boyfriend, Olympius, and then her friend Gloria. And that might be it for the characters, but it also seems like that's it for her life. There's a boss character, although I'm not sure he says or does anything. He's just alluded to, because she's a typist with Gloria, her coworker. So that's the story, and I think what the story to me really is an exploration of a person that is not of this time and not of this place, and so shatters our own understanding of self and understanding of what we should be doing here and how we're doing it, but through the lens of someone who is judging her very harshly and, again, making fun of her. And we're also maybe seeing the way that a certain type of person looks upon otherness in society. That's what I took from it, but there are, in 70 pages, a ton of themes around religion, reality, existentialism, how to live. Let me give some examples. So page 25, this is on, I just wrote reality as my little note. Because she was very impressionable and believed in everything that existed and everything that didn't exist too. But she didn't know how to dress up reality. For her, reality was too much to be believed. And so there you get there, obviously the note about being so impressionable, everything that did exist and everything that didn't exist too. And there's no filter, there's no sort of delineation between those two things for her. Life is so fresh and new and happening, almost kind of a Buddhist way, I'd say. I might regret saying that, but in such a very present, such a very present awareness, I think, of everything kind of all at once, all the time. And that's how she sort of floats through the world. But anyway, so the impressionableness you get, but also the reality was too much to be believed. So that goes back again to like everything is just like too bright and too intense. So page 32, I said that boyfriend, who's not really a boyfriend, but he's a jerk. And so she writes, she concluded that nobody had ever actually offended her. Everything that happened was because that's how things are, and there was no struggle possible. Struggle for what? Very big theme throughout her life as it's being told to the narrator is that everything that happens, that's just the way it is. I have no control over any of this, and so I have to accept it. And in this way, he's being a jerk, but she's never been offended. Struggle for what? And part of that like speaks to a lack of like tools, like some sort of fundamental tools to being human, right? And to navigating through this world that she lacks. And the narrator takes this as a real lacking, as a real mark against her. But I'm not sure that's the case as the reader. And again, this is why I would like to read more scholarly stuff, to discuss this with people more, to get a sense of how I feel about it. But my initial sense from just one read of this, which should require multiple, is that it was not a lacking, and that the narrator was wrong about that. And I'm not sure that I would go so far as to call it a strength or a superpower, but it is so unique and special to her and belongs solely to her that it shapes and paves her way through the world. I don't know that I can call it a lacking. So on page 42, I wrote, "She cries." This section is very, very good. This is a bit of an epiphany for her. When she heard it, and the it in this case is a beautiful song. When she heard it, she started to cry. It was the first time she'd ever cried. She didn't know she had so much water in her eyes. She cried, blew her nose, no longer knowing what she was crying about. She wasn't crying because of the life she led, because, never having led any other, she'd accepted that with her that was just the way things were. But I also think she was crying because, through the music, she might have guessed there were other ways of feeling. There were more delicate existences, and even a certain luxury of soul. I got a lot to unpack there, so let me start with the language of that is absolutely beautiful, brilliant. You see why this author is a master. Luxury, a certain luxury of soul. That's yes. Okay, so she started to cry. Didn't know she had that much water in her eyes. Great line. But the narrator's guessing at why she's crying. That's what I kind of want to unpack there. I'm really interested, as you can see, in this dynamic between us understanding reasons through the narrator. We're getting the truth and the action of what's happening, but the interpretation, it's suspect because we have this narrator over it that I find to be slightly unreliable. Well, it's a great guess, right? Not crying because of the life she led goes into that thing we heard just a minute ago, right? About how, well, this is just my life. There's no other. I've accepted that. But that there's a hint there. He feels that she senses a hint of other lives. I don't know. I think she could have been crying because it was beautiful. And I think the narrator wants her to feel that hint. And I think the narrator wants her to see the world as he sees the world and as regular people see the world, and might be putting that on her. But I don't know. That's just a thought. Page 61, the narrator is going to talk directly. So the narrator he intrudes. And at the very beginning, the narrator goes through 10 pages or so of setting us up for the story and talking about his role in telling the story. And it's very, very good and kind of funny. And that's when you start to get a lot of that unreliableness that I believe is there on purpose from the beginning. But so he'll every now and then kind of just stop the story to say something. And this is what he's doing here. I am absolutely tired of literature. Only muteness keeps me company. If I still write, it's because I have nothing better to do in the world while I wait for death. The search for the word in the dark. My small success invades me and exposes me to glances on the street. I want to stagger through the mud, my need for objection I can hardly control. The need for the orgy and the worst absolute delight. Sin attracts me. Prohibited things fascinate me. I want to be a pig and a hen and then kill them and drink their blood. I read a lot of writing about writing. That's a pretty good one. I don't know if the author is standing in there for the narrator, but that's a pretty good, the struggle to find that word in the dark and sort of these carnal desires to let this out, and only writing. The only reason that the person does it is nothing better to do while I wait for death. Muteness keeps me company, tired of literature. I do wonder how much of the author's in that, but I just loved that section. And frankly, that section doesn't really, it's an outlier, right? I mean, it's just one little paragraph. I've highlighted the first part, or two paragraphs, but one little section. I've highlighted the first part, but I feel like that's the only thing like that in the book that's that sort of direct and guttural. But I will say this, and as I get to the last section, it'll be relevant, or the last thing I'm going to read, which is just a sentence. It'll be relevant because we're going to see, in parentheses, a lot of times you'll see explosion. And it'll be just in regular sentences, so-and-so, explosion. So it's very, but it's kind of explosion of feeling. In this book and the way it ends, I have a lot highlighted in dog-eared that I'm not going to get to because I want you to read this book, and because the writing is so beautiful that it would be better for your head to read it and to absorb it than for me to give it to you, right? But the book feels like the ending is such an explosion. The ending is tremendous. It builds up to it in such a fantastic way. You're not quite sure what's coming, where it's going. When you finish it, you realize there was a great hint about 5 pages before that kind of foreshadowed it. So just a masterclass in storytelling, but it was a true kind of explosion. I only said that part now because we're going to get that word explosion in here, but I just liked this sentence. Makabe began explosion to quiver because of the painful side there is in excessive happiness. And of course that's beautiful because you know, hopefully you know that painful side in excessive happiness or any excessive feeling. And Macabre, the woman, certainly knows the painfulness of excessive feelings as she goes through her life with excessive feelings. So that's it for the Hour of the Star. I think it's a great, great book. A slim volume seems like a good place to start. I am someone who, unfortunately, I think for me, I get into a writer and then I just immediately read everything, and I'm trying not to do that. So I'm going to hold off on going to the next one. But if you have a suggestion for where I should go next with Clarice Lispector, I would really appreciate it. Drop it in the comments below or at my Twitter handle, which is also in the description. So next, I foreshadowed this last time when I did Ricardo Piglia's Target in the Night, because we talked about how there was some serendipity between a podcast I was listening to, the 3% podcast, and Tom Roberge, who's on that one, a co-host, is the co-owner of Riff Raff Books and Bar in Providence, Rhode Island, and he had written an article about John Patrick Manchette. Think for the LA Review of Books. I haven't read the article yet. I should. And Chad Post, who's the director of Open Letter, one of my favorite publishers that I have a subscription to. Love a lot of their books. He asked him, well, where should readers start? And 3 to Kill was what he said. So this is John Patrick Manchette's 3 to Kill, translated from the French by Donald Nicholson Smith, and it's a City Lights book. City Lights Noir is their little imprint for this. So this is going to be our next review. I love noir, as I said in the earlier one, so to find a new writer, I'm excited to talk about this one. Thanks, everybody. I'm going on a business trip for 3 days where I'll be in a hotel room alone. One of my favorite things is today, what I'm about to do, which is to pack up what books I'm going to bring along. I'm almost done with Die, My Love, which I talked about last time. So I think The Wind That Lays Waste is going to be coming. And then Rodrigo Freson's The Dreamed Part, speaking of Open Letter. I think I'm going to bring that and go ahead and get a kickstart before that 2-month review podcast starts doing their read of that in sections. But anyway, be good to folks.